Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. Gaming translator Lone joins the podcast as we chat about the Secret of Mother 2, aka Earthbound exhibit. We get into Hobonichi's 30th anniversary celebration for the iconic JRPG, our thoughts on the amazing exhibit, and which clay figure we would steal. In the game section, I check out the roguelite monster battler Dicefolk, plus a rundown on the news, including my thoughts on the upcoming Nintendo Museum. Let's start with Lone and the Secret of Mother 2 exhibit. Today's feature is on the Secret of Mother 2 exhibit, or the Secret of Earthbound, which I probably called it in the title for SEO purposes. But it's the newest experience from the Hobonichi Mother project happening right now in Tokyo, and it might be one of the biggest events they've ever done. Joining me to chat all about this fascinating exhibit is a special guest. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lone on Twitter. I'm a Japanese half, so half Japanese, half British, and I went to the exhibits 2 times. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me. Yes, I've only been once, so I'm definitely looking forward to hearing your perspective. And I think this exhibit has been getting a lot of overseas press. But for the uninitiated, what is the Secret of Mother 2 exhibit?
Right. So the Secret of Mother 2 exhibit is, well, basically Itoi and Hobonichi, they dug up a bunch of old files and old figures that were lying in storage for 30 years since Mother 2 was being developed. Since it's the anniversary year, they decided to show it all off to the public. So by secrets, it means like development secrets. So
yeah, it's hosted by the Hobonichi Mother Project, which is an offshoot sub-company or just another arm of the Hobonichi empire. And the event is in their event space on the 8th floor of Parco Shibuya. And in a past episode, I talked about all the different Earthbound pop-up shops in Tokyo, and many take place here, but this is perhaps the biggest in terms of importance or notoriety. And of course, this year is the 30th anniversary of Earthbound, so Hobonichi has been hyping this up for a while. What was your reaction to this event being the big 30th anniversary announcement?
Well, okay, I guess cutting right to the chase. Earthbound is actually my least favorite game in the series. So my first reaction was, I hope they do one for Mother 3 or Mother 1. but it's like, I still wanted to support Hobonichi. Mostly so they do more stuff for the other games as well.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
They were really hyping it up all year. And I think even from January or February, they've talked about an event they've quote unquote never done before, which made me wonder what it could possibly be. But it really is just an exhibit. However, the contents of the exhibit definitely fall in line with the idea that they've never done this before because people have never seen this before. What do you think about the other 30th anniversary activities they've done so far this year, like the new merch or the concert?
Yeah, I think the concert especially was very neat because, people from overseas could join in. It was just a live stream, so it doesn't matter if you're in Japan or if you're overseas, and they had the actual composers and stuff. So much as personally I prefer the real life events, I do think the stream was probably better overall for the community. And I also appreciated, new merch for a series that hasn't had a new entry in 18 years.
Right. Before we really dive into the exhibit, let's talk about our Earthbound history or our Mother history. What's your experience with the game? And are you a big Mother fan in general?
As with many other people, I first learned of the series through Super Smash Brothers. So in my case was Super Smash Brothers Brawl. I used Ness and Lucas a lot. Then around 2012, it would have been, I saw a Let's Play of Earthbound, and I recognized it as oh, look, it's Ness from Super Smash Brothers. So I watched the full playthrough of Earthbound, then I watched the whole playthrough of Mother 3, and that's what got me super hooked into the series. And then I decided, okay, graphically it may not look very good, but I'll make sure to look at Mother 1 as well. So I watched Let's Play of Mother 1 next. Then since I'm in Japan, I was able to buy all the games second hand. Eventually, I played all the games for myself. I went Mother 1, Mother 2, Mother 3. So, that was 11, 12 years ago now. And I've had my ups and downs with the games. But the thing is, it's because of my unique position, being a native Japanese and native English speaker in Japan, but also, being involved with the Western community. That kind of means like, I kind of realized the other day that I have the best of both worlds. So being able to access all the mother events, being able to just casually email Hobonichi in Japanese, like the language barrier isn't a thing. Whereas I think the Western fans are more united. Like there's a lot more fan games going around. There's a lot more fan stuff in general. So if Western fans wants to do something in Japan, they usually come to me and ask for translation stuff. So even when I was at my lowest in terms of interest in the Mother series, I still had people coming to me. So it's like, whether I want to or not, I have to be a part of this fandom just because of the very unique position I found myself in. But I think the recent Hobonichi events and stuff, especially getting to meet Itoi himself before, that's kind of reignited my interest in the series, actually. So I've actually been replaying Mother 3. So now I'm having like a second renaissance, I guess you could say, with the series.
Oh, okay. How did you come to meet Itoi?
Oh, yeah, that was a Hobonichi event. So that actually wasn't advertised through the Hobonichi Mother project. So I think someone in the Japanese fandom just casually mentioned it on Twitter. Then someone in one of the Discord servers I'm in, they saw the tweet and then they told me like, oh, hey, there's an event where you can meet Itoi. I mean, it's a raffle, but maybe you should try and see if you can win a spot in the raffle. So I did, I won a spot. So so it's thanks to all the Western fans keeping a lookout for me that managed to happen.
I have a very typical Earthbound journey like you. Of course, I first heard of it through Smash Brothers, but I'm a bit older than you, I think, so I played the N64 version. And I did think, who is this Ness guy? I knew all the characters except for Ness. And from there, I learned about the series and eventually played the game and enjoyed it very, very much. And I actually replayed it on the 3DS around 2018, which I guess is a long time ago now that I think about it. But I am not my whole personality is Earthbound type of person, but I really do enjoy the game. And it is truly unique in a lot of ways. And so, that's enough background. I think we can get into the exhibit now. The Secret of Mother 2. Lone, you take one step into the exhibit. What's the first thing you notice?
The first thing I laid eyes on was all the handwritten documents just all on the wall. But I mean, quite literally, a wall of text. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to have to note all of this down. I mean, of course, I did wind up noting every little detail, just the things I thought were significant. Yeah, all the text was probably the biggest thing. Like, look at all this juicy information.
Yeah, there are essentially two main types of things in the exhibit. The original design documents from the creation of the game and clay figures, which are used in promo material. So if you've ever seen any Earthbound promo material, they have the real deal clay figures here at the exhibit. And of course, there's a merch area, which we'll get to later. Now, we really can't go into detail about what specifically are on the design documents. Can you shed some light on why?
Right. Yeah, so I actually emailed Hobonichi regarding confidentiality about the documents. And I even asked an attendant when I went there, like, hey, is it okay if I take notes? And the attendant said, yeah, it's fine to take notes. And even in the email, Hobonichi said, like, if you want to take notes for personal use, that's fine. But just don't share them on SNS. And I mean, of course, the language is a little vague, so I had to double check for this podcast as well. To which they also said, like, yes, please don't share the contents of the document on the podcast. So,
right.
So because Hobonichi told us to, basically.
Yes. Right. I don't want to make Hobonichi mad or get some sort of copyright strike or whatever on the podcast. So we aren't going to be revealing the quote unquote secret of Mother 2, but we can at least talk about our general thoughts on the exhibit. So the design documents, what was your takeaway from how they developed the game or just how games were developed in the 90s in general?
Oh, right. It started very broad. Like, I was thinking like, wow, Itoi had a lot of ideas. And as the game development process went on, he cut the fat, he trimmed it down slowly until we got what's in the final game. So it was like Itoi had a very strict refinement process. Is probably the biggest takeaway.
Last episode, I talked about the Dragon Quest Carnival, and one part of it is a Dragon Quest III exhibit, which also had the original design documents. I think some were just copies, but a lot of them were the real deal things. Yeah, in both exhibits, the Mother 2 exhibit and the Dragon Quest 3 exhibit, you can take pictures of everything except for the documents. Why the big secret? Is there something about game development in Japan where they really don't want to let the cat out of the bag no matter how much time has passed?
I'm not stating this as a fact. This is just more of a speculation of that, but I think it might have to do with the fact that these are Nintendo consoles. So I know Nintendo is known for being very strict within the industry. So, yeah, and I do know like Nintendo is pretty hush-hush about the development secrets and stuff. So, yeah, I suspect it might have something to do with Nintendo, honestly. Like a company like Sega, for example, is known for being way more open. So if it was about a Sega game, for example, I mean, once again, it's just a theory, so I could be wrong here, but I do think that they would probably be way more open about, say, photo taking or sharing stuff on social media.
Itoi is not shy about making money. Do you think there's eventually going to be a big The Secret of Mother 2 book with scans of all these documents? Or is it just going to be this exhibit and then it's done?
I actually emailed Hobonichi about that as well. I didn't ask them to create an artwork for Mother 2. I just told them that when the foreign fans first saw the trailer, they thought it was an artwork and they were getting very excited and all wanted to purchase it. So, so they actually didn't directly mention the artwork part in their response. I just sort of nudged them and said, oh, hey, people are very interested in buying something like this. But they didn't confirm or deny anything, so take that as you will. But yeah, I mean, I have been asked about like a confidentiality thing, like if it's because, Itoi wants people to pay money to get in, but honestly, the fact that re-entry is free, the fact that you only need to purchase the tickets once, I think it's a sign it's not really about the money, if that makes any sense.
Right.
It's like, I think Itoi is more doing this like as appreciation for the fans more than anything.
Let's talk about the clay figures. Now, these are the real deal clay figures from the Earthbound promo art, and remarkably, they are still in incredible condition and on display for everyone to see. And yes, you can actually take photos of these. And you can't take photos of the documents, but these you can go to town. How do you feel about being able to see the figures in the flesh, or in the clay, I guess?
Bit of a tough question for me because, I don't know, because like Mother 3 figures flat out don't exist, so I can't say like, oh, if it was Mother 3, I'd feel this. But if it was, say, Mother 1 stuff, I probably would be like, oh wow, I remember seeing this in like the instruction manual or some old PR thing. But yeah. But because it was Earthbound, it's just like neat.
Was there any figure that really stood out to you?
I think probably the Frank one, because like they even modeled his eyes, even though they didn't have to, and it's not in his sprite. Like these weren't supposed to be for display anyhow, but they went the extra step anyhow.
Yeah, for me, I think Ness is pretty hard to beat. He's got that confident pose. And I quite liked, of course, Master Belch and Starman, of course, and Dr. Endonuts with the donut is great as well. And above the figures of the playable characters are sketches of them with some notes, and you can take photos of these at least. Do you have any takeaways from these sketches of the characters?
I've seen similar sketches from like other games as well. So yeah, they have like a lot of specifications for like how the characters are designed, like what their body proportions are. Yeah, I don't think I was focusing too much on the characters during my trips to the exhibit. I was more focused on the documents, unknown information more than anything.
So you've got the documents, you've got the figures, and in the last little area, they also showed some promo material from both the Japanese and US releases of Earthbound, which aren't secret, but it was fun to see them in person. Was there anything in this section that really grabbed your attention?
Yeah, so my very first thought was, oh, I've seen these before in person. And that's because I'm acquainted with a Japanese collector, Koala. He's a YouTuber. He's the biggest mother collector in the world. And I think he showed me like the videotape and like the blue poster. And I remember thinking like, how did she even manage to get a hold of the videotape? So that wasn't even sold in stores. And they had like the ruler and stuff as well, which once again, Koala had also showed me. So it's like, so that was my main thought, like, oh yeah, Koala has those too.
I was getting a kick out of them showing like the English or the American versions of promo material. Because of course in America, Earthbound was very famously, like the marketing wasn't very good. And it's so different visually from the Japanese advertisements. Even the name is just totally different. So I think Japanese people, they must be like, oh, what is this? When they see the American promo material.
Yeah, I think that was the 90s in general. Like Kirby looks happy in the Japanese box art, but angry at the American one. Stuff like that.
The last section of the exhibit is a merch shop, which housed mostly items they've sold before at other Earthbound pop-up shops. But there were some new things here as well. Did you nab any merch on your visits?
Yeah. This time I got the Life Noodles. It's probably the biggest thing. And I finally bought the books with all the dialogue from the Mother games.
Oh, yes,
Just
yes.
exciting. Yeah, the Life Noodles, I mean, it said 2 servings, but each serving is actually pretty hefty. So it's like, I thought like, oh, these are quite expensive for noodles, but yeah,
right.
they're pretty high quality, and each serving is quite a bit as well. So I think that justifies the price. And the Mother books as well. Yeah, I remember the cashier said like, oh, be careful, the books are very heavy. So instead of just 1 paper bag, I got like 2 paper bags. And I thought it was really neat that the books came in an Escargo Express cardboard box.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
But yeah, that's so cool that I didn't throw out the box, even I kept the box. It's like, yeah, even so it doesn't like thinks the box is cool. Like that's how cool it was. Well, I guess it's more like, it's just such a nice attention to detail. It feels like a waste to throw it out. Like it feels like a part of the collection.
True.
Yeah, so it felt very different from just looking up the scripts online, just because of all that small stuff.
Yeah, the noodles are part of the 30th anniversary, I guess, activities, where they are noodles from Gunma, which I guess is famous for udon. It seems like a lot of prefectures and cities are famous for udon. I don't know how so many can be famous for it, but these are, I guess, imported from Gunma, so maybe that's why they're expensive. And I guess you will live longer than I will since you ate them, and I didn't. So that's something to look forward to. I wanted to get a t-shirt, but my size was sold out. But a cool thing is that they did have the vinyl Nest figure on display here, which was announced recently, and it's only available via lottery currently, and it's about 30,000 yen. So a bit too pricey for me, but I'm happy I at least got to see it. So I'm very satisfied. Did you enter the lottery to get the Nest figure?
I wouldn't pay that much for Earthbound merch.
What about if it was a Lucas figure?
Yeah, I would if it was of Lucas, yes. Because a misconception with the Nest figure was like, it was going to be only available in the lottery, so I'm glad it's going to be available normally for everyone else after.
Yeah. So what were your overall thoughts on the exhibit? Did it meet your expectations? Was there anything else they should have added from the development of the game?
If anything, like there was too much information to take in at once. Because my first visit was on a weekend, and I had reserved, but I felt a little bad like staying there for as long as I did. I was worried that one of the Honichi attendants was going to tell me to leave, so I would, so the place wouldn't get too crowded. But thankfully that didn't happen, so I had to go back a second time because there was stuff I missed, even the first time, just because there was so much information, and honestly, there's probably still a lot of stuff I missed. It would probably take several hours to physically copy down every single word written there.
Right.
I mean, being honest with you, I probably would if it was Mother 3, and especially if it was Earthbound 64, but other people are documenting it and stuff as well. I guess from my perspective, I probably enjoyed the King Porky event. That was one that the Itoy meet and greet, especially, but that's a bit different. But I'm sure, fans of Mother 2 probably would get a huge kick out of this one for sure.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty amazing exhibit, especially just to see the journey from paper to the actual video game. Now we have project management apps. We've got stuff like Adobe and Figma to help us visualize things. But back in the day, you had paper and then sometimes graph paper, and that was it. That's how the game began. So I have a lot of respect for the devs who worked in those days where everything was just so analog. And of course, there's a ton of new information here that we really can't talk about, but I'm sure it will be made public one day. But if it's not, I'm glad I got to see it in person. And even just to see Itoi's handwriting just scrawled on some paper is really cool to see. But if you're in Tokyo before September 8th and love Earthbound, I would definitely recommend the exhibit. So final question, if you could take anything from the exhibit and keep it in your home, what are you taking?
probably the rare Blue Earth Mother 2 poster. Just because
yes.
Koala has told me how rare it is. I personally know the value of it, so it would be so cool to have that just casually hung on my wall. It's like, oh yeah, this is one of the rarest piece of Mother merch ever.
Yeah, for me, I think I definitely want to take that Nest figure. That's an easy choice. It would be cool to have Starman in my home as well, just keeping watch. But speaking of things you can sell, they might make some plastic versions of these clay figures down the line for us to enjoy. But until then, you can see them at the exhibit. So Lone, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on a bunch of Motherbound-related Discord servers. So yeah, I think the Earthbound 64 Mother 3 one and the Mother Encore one, the remake of Mother 1, which, yeah, I translated into Japanese. So if that's your thing, go for it.
Cool.
Yeah, those are the ones that are the most active on Twitter as well, I guess.
Great. And the links to everything will be in the podcast description, so listeners, check it out. Lone, once again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I'm mostly just waiting for Zelda, so I have been tackling my backlog a bit. I definitely want to do a random backlog buster segment on the podcast in the future, where I just run down all the random games I played this year that I've really never talked about on the podcast. But I actually did pick up a 2024 game on Switch recently, Dicefolk. It's a roguelite monster battler from the developers Tiny Ghoul and Leap Game Studios. This is Tiny Ghoul's first game, and Leap put out Tunch, which is a roguelike action game. Can't say I'm familiar with their backgrounds, but the publisher is Good Shepherd Entertainment, which has published a lot of indie games, including Monster Train, which is another roguelite deck builder. So rogue, the word of the day is rogue. I have been on a roguelite kick recently because my current game of the year is Balatro, so I got to thinking, well, is there another game like Balatro? Dicefolk is sort of adjacent and got good reviews, so I picked it up. Some have said it's a roguelike Pokemon, and no, it's not quite that. You do build a team of monsters, but there's no training or leveling up or evolution aspects. The monsters are just the characters you fight with, and are fairly static in how you use them. The fun comes from changing out your team and equipping items that give them special abilities. Like many similar games, the joy comes from customizing your team to your liking and experimenting with what they can do. Is this a deck builder roguelike? I mean, you don't just have a deck of cards, but you do customize a team. A team builder roguelite? Are any of these things words? But if you played a few of these rogue games, the format is pretty similar. You're on a map that's node-based, and you can freely visit different parts, so it's not like Slay the Spire where you need to pick a route. You can easily encounter everything on the map at your leisure. The goal is to beat the boss of the map, and you move on to the next one. And you do that via turn-based monster battles. The battles may seem like a typical JRPG-style turn-based affair, but there are so many twists that results in a genuinely exciting battle system. You've got a team of 3 monsters, and you're often fighting against another team of 3. I said earlier that the abilities are often more important than stats, and that's because monsters have very specific abilities that shape how you play. Like one monster attacks automatically every time an enemy rotates out of the lead. Another monster attacks enemies every time you rotate, or some monsters cast status effects on other enemies at the beginning of the battle. Figuring out the synergy between monsters is the key to battle. Each team has a lead monster, or I guess I should call them Chimera, because that's what the game calls them, and this lead Chimera delivers the attack. But you're not just picking attack and trading licks back and forth. What you can do in each battle is determined by the titular dice in Dicefolk. You start off with 3 dice, and each side has an ability. This could be an attack, or a rotation, which switches out the lead Chimera, or a guard, or really any number of things. So for instance, you could have 2 attack dice and 1 rotation dice. That means you can attack twice and switch out the leader once. You can also use them in any order, so you can do attack, attack, or rotation, attack, or whatever. And since they're dice, what you have each round is a bit different. Rotating monsters in and out is also a huge part of the game since you can build a team around essentially just switching out your monsters around the battlefield. Now, one of my absolute favorite elements of the game is that the enemy also have dice, and you can choose which dice to use when. So you are selecting your enemy's moves in a sense, something I don't think I've ever seen in any turn-based battle system before. Before you can end the turn and re-roll all the dice, you have to exhaust all the enemy dice. But you can be very clever with this to ensure that you take as little damage as possible, or even no damage at all. For example, you can rotate out to a weaker monster and have them attack, or make an enemy monster use a move that incapacitates them, meaning they can't attack again, then use the enemy attack dice, which does nothing since the monster is exhausted. There's a lot of interesting things you can do to make the enemies waste their turns. The core battle system is incredibly strong and allows for different strategies depending on how you customize your Chimera. And there's certainly a lot of customization options. Chimera can equip items which give them stat boost or special abilities. You can also customize the dice faces that give you different techniques in the battle. And of course, you have to switch out monsters during each run. You always start with a generic team, but each map has 3 monster statues and you need to pick one. However, you only see them one at a time, and if you pick the first monster you come across, you'll never know what the other 2 monsters are. Sometimes it's okay to just nab the first monster if you're really confident or need to swap out a teammate. But team synergy is of utmost importance. You need to think about your build, what you're trying to focus on during each battle. I had a great run where I just had one monster equipped with a ton of activation items, which builds up points, and when you get to 10 activation points, they do an absurd amount of damage to the boss. I also had a run that was focused on extra damage whenever somebody rotated, another run based around burn, which lets you do extra damage per attack. Like any good roguelike, there's many ways to win, and it's fun to figure out a build and see it pay off. The final boss creamed me the first time, but the next time I fought it, none of my monsters even got to half health because I had an awesome setup. This is what you want from these types of games, the ability to completely break the game in some way or absolutely crush an enemy you had trouble with earlier. It's a really clever deck builder, team builder, whatever this genre is, since the battle system is so creative and it offers a great deal of customization. But I do have some complaints. For one, I don't like starting with the generic team each time. It would be more fun if you could draft a team of 3 at the start, which lets you focus on a build faster. Also, each run is pretty long, probably an hour or so. It's a roguelite, so even if you lose, you still earn something, mostly unlocking new monsters to use the next time around. But I've been Balatro-pilled, and those runs are about 20 minutes or so, and yet it still nails the feeling of getting significantly stronger. I'm not saying every roguelite should have a run that should be 20 minutes max, but what if that was the rule? I think the game would be even more fun if it basically just wiped out the first map, giving you 3 strong monsters at the start, and then you can get going much quicker. Again, going back to Balatro, the decks you unlock come with some interesting advantage right out of the gate, so it feels like you've already earned something from the first round. In Dicefolk, it really does feel like you were just starting every run the exact same way, and it's not until the later maps where your team really kicks in, and by then you're almost done. So sad to say, it's not the greatest game there ever was or ever will be, but it is a very solid roguelite with an absolutely stellar battle system, and I would love this battle system to be implemented into a traditional JRPG, for instance. Oh, and I totally forgot to mention about the art, and it's a very clean cartoon art style, and I think the monsters look pretty distinct, which is hard to do. They are more like JRPG enemies than Pokemon, but there are a lot of very strong designs. I like Esquivel, which is kind of like a big beetle with a giant blade on the top of its head. Dicefolk is $15 on Switch, not a bad price, and it will probably take you a couple of runs before you beat the final boss, and even after that, you can mess around with all the trials, which have more customized rule sets, and focus on unlocking more Chimera. Definitely put Dicefolk on your radar if you're into... What is this genre called again? Monster rotating dice roguelites? Let's go with that. That's all for games. Now for some news. We got an unusual Nintendo Direct, a Nintendo Museum Direct, highlighting the soon-to-open Nintendo Museum in Kyoto, Japan. The Direct got a lot of attention despite the fact that most people are probably nowhere near Kyoto, but with the boom of tourism in Japan, I can see a lot of people thinking about trying to swing by on a future trip. It was a 13-minute video where Miyamoto guided us through the museum, which is in the same location as their old factory in Uji back in the day. Not too dissimilar from how Nintendo approached theme parks, the museum is also focused on interactivity and playing games. Miyamoto showed off the second floor first, which is kind of a weird thing to do, but who am I to tell Miyamoto what to do? It's mostly just a product display of all the Nintendo games throughout their history. Some eagle-eyed folks have spotted that it may include every single Nintendo-developed game, and even titles that they only published. They are huge, bright displays with game boxes from both the Japanese and US versions, with enormous controllers hovering above them. There's even a giant Virtual Boy controller, so Nintendo isn't shying away from that part of their history. This floor also has many of their pre-video game items, ranging from the board games to baby strollers to light guns. Something tells me the dirty cards aren't in here. As a display area, it looks very expansive and clean, but the fact that all their pre-game stuff is just shoved into one big case is a bit worrying. The game displays also just seem to be that, displays. There's no placards or information anywhere. The main criticism I've seen about the museum is that, are you going to learn anything about Nintendo after you visit the museum? Or will you just look at a display and say, hey, it's Kid Icarus? I think it's very possible that there could be some informative app, since having info on every single game in multiple languages on the display cases, I mean, there's no room for that. We did see some sort of app, which I'll get to later, but they really didn't highlight it in the Direct. On the website, it says that they are shared with, quote, little explanation, which is not very reassuring. It's more of an art display than a museum if you think about it. That's fine for Nintendo hardcores who will probably know every single game in the case, but again, going back to the question, will you learn anything at the Nintendo Museum? But outside of just having a bunch of old stuff, there are many interactive activities highlighting Nintendo's history on the first floor. Many of them take influence from the AR integrated projection mapping exhibits that are extremely popular in Japan these past few years. Think Team Labo or Borderless. Also, Pokemon Colors, which I did talk about on a previous episode. The big one they highlighted was Hyakunin Ishu, which is a traditional Japanese set of cards with poems written on them. Though the game highlighted is Uta Karuta, where someone reads one of the poems on the cards and the players have to find the card first. Ironically, on their website, they list the game as Shigureden, which is the name of their Hyakunin Ishu DS game, so that's kind of a deep pull. And it's here where you see somebody use an app. I don't know if this is the Nintendo Museum specific app or something different. Other projection mapping games include using the Zapper or Super Scope to shoot Mario enemies on a screen. I mean, this is literally from the Pokemon Colors exhibit, except this one looks like it works way better. The website also highlights a lot of activities that weren't in the Direct, like a Game & Watch where you use your body, the Love Tester returns, and Ultra Machine, which is like a batting cage. And of course, there's even an Ultra Hand game here too. The main event, though, is the giant controller area, where you can play on humongous versions of the Famicom, N64, Wiimote, and more. This is by far going to be the most popular activity, and it's definitely the most photogenic. Out of all of them, I want to try out the N64 controller. Just moving that giant joystick, that's going to be great. There is a bit of small text here where every visitor gets 10 coins via their ticket card, and playing these activities costs coins. And they say you can't do all the activities with 10 coins, and there's no way to buy more coins. So you cannot do everything in one trip, which is kind of an odd thing to say outright. For many people, they would go to the Nintendo Museum once in their entire life, so you need to decide now about whether you want to play with the Ultra Hand or the Love Tester. This probably helps reduce lines for activities though. You don't want some absurd hour-long wait just to use the giant Wii remote. When it comes to the interactive elements, Nintendo really nailed it. A lot of their history is incorporated here, from the cards to the toys to the games, and it's a great modern reimagining of classic entertainment. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there is an area where you can play Hanafuda, including this awesome-looking hybrid between a tatami mat and LED electronics. And you can even make your own Hanafuda card, which is such an awesome idea. And yes, there is a merch shop, although it's unknown what will be sold here. And a small cafe that advertises the Hatena burger, which has 270,000 combinations. I mean, I love burgers, but I'm not super creative when it comes to these Build-A-Burgers. Meat, cheese, lettuce, tomato, I'm done. Are they going to have crazy Nintendo-themed options? Wario garlic? Yoshi eggs? It opens October 2nd, and you can only get in via lottery for now, and if I had to predict it, I think they would do the lottery for many, many months. Even when they move away from the lottery system, I imagine they will still keep the reservation system, meaning you probably have to reserve at least a month ahead of time, like with the Pokemon Cafe. So don't think you can just waltz in there on the day during your trip to Kyoto. I'm very excited to visit the museum eventually, but it does feel like a mini theme park instead of a proper museum. You could do a ton of stuff with just Nintendo's history, like a big exhibit solely about Hanafuda, or showcasing prototype hardware, or showing off the design documents for classic games, like with the Mother 2 exhibit. I want to see things I've never seen before, but Nintendo wants you to experience their curated history via play, which I guess fits with their philosophy. I probably can't go this year, but I would do my best and try to nab somebody who went to pop into the podcast and tell us all about it. Pokemon Worlds happened in Hawaii, and it was fairly light on game announcements outside of Pokemon TCG Pocket getting a date, October 30th. A trailer showed off a bit more of the game, and yeah, it really does mostly just look like a card collector game instead of something like Pokemon Marvel Snap. I'm very interested to see how streamlined the battle system is. Somebody pointed out that they say you can battle against the AI or with your friends. So, is there matchmaking? I mean, it's very possible that there is zero matchmaking for the battle portion of the game. It could really just be CPU versus somebody next to you. That would be majorly disappointing for me, since that was the element I was most looking forward to, because I do like playing the Pokemon TCG as a card game, but realistically, I'm not going to play against somebody I know in real life, or go through the effort to make a competitive deck. But these card collector apps are very popular, and I can see this game bringing in a lot of whales. I'm definitely going to at least try it out, and I might even put some money into it just to see what it's like, so I'll report back on a future app of the podcast. Or maybe I'll be totally absorbed by the game and you'll never see me again. Who knows? Last bit of news, some Tokyo happenings. Yodobashi Camera Shinjuku Nishiguchi will hold a Metaphor demo on September 1st. Play it and you get a clear file, the most valuable item in all of Japan. Yodobashi Camera has actually been doing these pre-release demos quite a bit frequently as of late. There was a Yodobashi Camera game show not too long ago where you could play Stray and a few other games right outside their store. I'd love for this to become more of a thing since I love that store and it's not insanely crowded. So if I can, I'll try to play Metaphor. Other Tokyo stuff, there's a pop-up shop for Exit 8 at Parco Ikebukuro. I haven't seen the products yet, so I'm not sure exactly what you can buy, but if you need Exit 8 merch, it's there. It is pretty fun to see how much this game has blown up in Japan, but it didn't seem to make a big splash in the West. But it's definitely a game worth trying out. Okay, we can wrap it up. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well. It really helps with visibility. This podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. If there's anything you want to talk about or cover, don't be shy. Just message me on Twitter. The next episode will be on September 8th. See you next time. Matane!